알라하요 호야데 호이샤나라카세.
Hi, everyone. My name is Stella Chadwick. I'm the founder of a clinic called Brainstorm Health. Some of you are familiar with it and some of you are not. So Brainstorm Health was established a while back, and the idea of it was to help children who are on the spectrum, as well as all children who have any neurological conditions, have the opportunity to have their whole body and brain connection checked out to see if there's anything there that we can do in terms of looking at dietary changes, maybe some nutrient deficiencies that they have, maybe some detoxification that they need, maybe some mitochondrial support they need. There's so many different things. And our mission statement was to make sure that these children don't fall in the cracks, that they end up getting the appropriate support that they need to become the best that they can be. Okay, so functional medicine is a discipline of medicine that incorporates nutrition and supplements and other therapies too, but primarily that to help the body in a very systematic way. So that means that we make sure that we do things in a very organized fashion, that we do things according to the functional medicine model, which is to make sure that the child, number one, has is able to detoxify properly. Number two, that if we identify anything like bacterial infections or yeast infections or parasitic infections or anything like that, that is gotten rid of. They are for remove, the second part of our program. The third part of our program is to replace, which means we make sure children have all the right nutrients, they have enough enzymes for digesting their food, they have good strong hydrochloric acid in their stomach to digest everything down. And then you go into the fourth R, which is the re-inoculation, where we then put all the good stuff back in, like probiotics and prebiotics and all those things. And then the final R of the program is to repair. So if there's anything we feel that needs repairing in the gut, or we need some more brain support using specific products like phosphatidylcholine or phosphatidylserine, or very high dose of things that need to be monitored, that's when we do all this sort of that extra work. So it's really treating children or supporting children like they're children. There's nothing no different to any other child. They just have autism or they have neurological disorders. Just because they have that, it doesn't mean that they don't deserve 100% attention to their well-being. And that is the mission statement of our organization. So when I started this years ago, I was inundated virtually from week one. This is how much people out there needed this type of support. And since then, we've grown, and we have several practitioners as part of my team, and we're growing all the time. We have relationships with neurologists, immunologists, pediatricians, GPs. So we have a huge network, osteopaths, homeopaths, all sorts of people, where we have built a very strong relationship, and we all are from the same page. We all believe in this. Nobody is going to say, well, it's autism. That just never will happen within the people that we work with. And they will pay close attention to looking at the underlying issues that's going on. Mm-hmm. So when you just to wrap up, is that often I'll get, because I'm the one who's the founder, and I'll get people who always want to come and see me. But what I wanted to say very clearly is that every person who joins our clinic already has a child who's either on the spectrum, been on the spectrum, has PANS, has PANDAS, they've walked the walk, talked the talk. And so they already have done that. Not only that, but they also have done huge amount of education up to degree level and further. There's one of them doing a master's at the moment, another one looking to do a PhD. So they're extremely qualified. Then you have the 18 months of training that they have to do with me on top of that. Then I monitor every single health plan that goes out. We go through every single test that you do. So in the background, I have humongous input in everything. And so I'm like the see all and be all at the top. And so nothing, I have to approve everything. So I sign everything off before it comes to the patient. So just to help you, because there's only so much capacity that I have as one person, and a lot of people need help. And I don't want them to feel like they shouldn't be getting help or waiting months to get an appointment. If you have a child who has issues, deal with it right now. Time is of the essence. You know, it's really important you get in. Sooner the better. And we are a highly professional team, and we try and respond to you as quickly as we can. The other thing, last thing I'm going to say, is that we have a system called Practice Better, which we've moved everything to. And that is a great system where we keep everything in place. You can, if you're a new patient, we'll send you a link. You just book a discovery call with us, which is free. It's usually about 15-20 minutes for us to make sure that we can help you, to give you an opportunity to ask us questions. And that is the way we're going to communicate with you. You're not going to get a phone call. You're going to get that discovery call link. Always check your spam folder in case it ends up there. But generally, it seems to work. But sometimes we get people contacting us or calling us saying, we haven't heard from you. And virtually every single time it's been because it's ended up in a spam folder and they haven't seen it. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So that's me.
Okay, thank you very much for this very detailed introduction. You have, I think this is the second meeting we have together. During that time, you have seen number of children from the Somali community.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to ask, without, go into confidentiality, just what is the number that you have seen so far?
Oh my gosh.
Roughly, a rough estimate.
More than 100. So
wow. Okay.
Yeah.
What is the common underlying issues with the children, and how far?
Common historical issue, like when you look at when we take on a patient, I have to preface my answer, is that the first really important thing for us to understand is what happened. Was it from birth? Was it something that happened while the mum was pregnant? Was it even before that? Was it an event that happened afterwards? Was there an illness? Was there a trauma? Whatever it is, that did something trigger it when they were 12 months, 2 years, 4 years, whatever it is. It's usually obviously between 12 months and 18 months that things, reveal themselves. So for us, it's really important. So historically, looking at the Somalian community, the common two threads are that the iron level in all the mums is really low when they're pregnant, or they have a history of low iron. The other thread is that they have very low vitamin D when they have the baby. And it might not sound like a lot, but those two things together have been shown to have a significant impact on brain development. And so it's really not a minor thing. It's quite a major thing to be aware of. So that's the sort of the common thread we see. The third thing that I see is that food intolerance is very common, and particularly to dairy products in the UK. I know that many of you already know this, but it is virtually universal that happens within your community. So if you can't afford to take any help from a professional right now, get those three things right. Make sure the child's iron level is correct. And when you do that, please, when you go to your GP, don't just ask for hemoglobin and iron levels. It's not good enough. You have to ask for something called ferritin. And I'm going to write this down. Okay. Ferritin is a storage tank of iron. It's like your hot water tank. It's where you build your iron in your system, and then your body is so iron dependent that it will pull from that until you've got virtually nothing left. And suddenly, bang, you have terrible anemia and problems. And remember that iron carries oxygen around in the body. So if you don't have enough iron, your brain is not being oxygenated. So you can't think properly. And this is why sometimes things like hyperbaric oxygen therapy works so well with these children, because it's pushing oxygen to where there is lacking. But really, if you look at it, if you have adequate iron levels, you don't need that really, unless you've had brain injury, in which case a hyperbaric oxygen therapy can be helpful.
So do we take it from supplement or food or combine?
So the most important thing with iron is to identify that you don't have any kind of bacterial infections and the parasitic infections. The reason for that is, and you'll know if you can't afford to see someone, if you give iron and your child really regresses, you'll know that what's happening is you're feeding that bacteria and parasite. And so then you need to get professional support, because we need to identify what it is and then eliminate that. So if you give iron to your child and they're thriving, suddenly eating better, kids who have low iron, they're very picky eaters. It's not just about zinc. Iron is much more important. Zinc levels are important as well. Never give iron and zinc together. They cancel each other out. It's really important to know that. So always give them at least an hour apart from each other. Get it through food if you can. Improve digestion, with digestive enzymes, or just a little shot of lemon juice just before a meal can zhuzh everything up a little bit with a bit of water if your child will take it. And that can help with absorption. So just do all the basics. So iron supplements, getting something like Spartone from Boots is perfect. Make sure it's with vitamin C because it helps to its absorption. And then, so do that. Make sure you've checked it, that if it's low, your doctor will probably prescribe something to you. I don't like ferrous sulfate, which is what's usually prescribed because it makes kids very constipated. If you can ask for something more gentle from your GP, ask. If not, then get your own if you can afford it, which is the Spartone. Sorry, what was the question? I lost the thread of the question. What did you ask?
There's two parts to it. Many of the parents who, first, you do have a long waiting list to be seen, and relatively long. Okay, and the second part is some of them, they cannot afford to come at the moment. So would you mind maybe after this call to email me just as a starter, what can they do and what they can follow until they can get an appointment?
Yeah, I mean, I probably, this video is going to help them. I think this is probably because it's visual and I can explain very easily. So number one is we don't have a long waiting list. I have a long waiting list.
Oh, sorry. Okay, it's you.
Clinic, you can get an appointment next week if you wanted to. So that's absolutely.
You keep telling me, no, Brainstorm has a long waiting list.
See me, and I love that, and I'm so grateful that you are. I'm feeling the love. Thank you so much. But I promise you, it would really break my heart that if you didn't get help quickly because of that, because you are getting me, just not directly. Okay. And you're getting our program. The program is the key. I've developed it over 15 years. It's been honed and it's perfect now. We know exactly what we're doing. We have everything, all the tests we need to do, all the monitoring we need to do, all the we know when we've hit a wall, we know how to move forward, all of that. So please don't worry about waiting lists. And the other part of the question was, what can they do? So look, 80% of what you're going to achieve is through what you're putting in your child's mouth to eat and drink. Okay, I guarantee you, it doesn't get more funky than that. So make sure that what you are feeding your child is wholesome food. If you can't do gluten, dairy free, fair enough. You're not sure, you're not confident, that's okay. But make sure you stay away from colorings, artificial additives, artificial flavors, anything that is hugely processed, and just keep to your normal, like, whole food. So I know Mona's having a little bit of a cough, bless her. So I'll just carry on talking. So get that food bit right. Make sure in the mornings you are giving yourself your child a breakfast that includes protein, like fish, chicken. You know, don't worry about breakfast food being breakfast food. It doesn't always have to be breakfasty. Just give whatever, eggs, sausages, if you have halal sausages, or you have all sorts of other acceptable meats that you can give. You know, little mini burgers, give them muffins that are loaded with protein. You'll find loads of inspiration on our website under the recipe section. I'm not a food blogger, okay? I don't do it to get money or anything. It's for my patients. This is food I make for my family. I don't have any links with anybody. I don't tag or anything. It's just there, okay? So and so this is food that I know works, and I know that I've made. My daughter was on a paleo style diet for 2 years, so I had to be very creative myself. So so use that. Make sure your food is wholesome. Make sure you absolutely stay away from processed sugars, are horrendous for the children. Processed like additives and all sorts of things. And in baked goods particularly, there is so much garbage, I can't even tell you. And your poor little body, their poor little body has to process all this, and it can't. And from a dietary point of view, if you want to go into more specialist diet, if you're going to go dairy-free, make sure you give your child a good multivitamin that contains calcium. It's very important for, let's say, a child aged around 4. They need about 700-800 milligrams of calcium per day. And if there's a child who needs, who's a bit older, they need about 1,000. When they get to teenagers, they need a bit more, so 1,200. I think I'll fix my video so that.
Sadia, can you please mute? Can you please mute everybody?
I'm trying. How do I do this? I have muted. Okay. Let me find you, Mona. Where are you?
I'm unmuted.
Oh, you've unmuted yourself. Okay, so
just a question.
Yeah.
How do you even, like, I've got so many children in the group. They're extremely picky eater. The mother's like, I cannot get him to eat anything. These children are on milk, dairy products, and on carbs. So we're like, one lady yesterday, she's like, Muna, you can suggest whatever you like. This child is not eating. What do I do?
Okay, so very good question. Excellent question. So there are, when we work with children, we identify them. Number one, are they just a picky eater, or are they a problem eater? There are very different ways you have to deal with
problem eater.
Okay. Picky eaters, you can negotiate, you can do this, you have this, then you have that later, and you can use treats and rewards.
Let me give you an example.
No, I'm about to answer you, but the problem eaters are the ones who, if you mix 2 colors together, they freak out, or they're almost like frightened of food. So those children actually need a group support. They cannot be, I mean, the parent always feels like a failure, you know, and it's not their fault. They have to have medical things ruled out, like you can have these, for example, immune cells called eosinophils that can line up the throat that actually makes it really sore for the child to eat. They could have tummy ache, they could have impaction. If they're constipated, they will have 0 appetite. So all of these things have to be ruled out. So if we work with a child that is like that, the first thing we do is we speak to the GP through a letter and explain our concerns and say that this child needs input from a feeding clinic where there is an occupational therapist and other therapists to help with this child, and for the doctor to make sure that they have definitely, I'm just going to mute everyone again, definitely ruled out anything medical. I cannot tell you how important that is. Because if you don't do that, you will end up feeling like a terrible parent, you can't feed your child, and it becomes a vicious cycle. And it categorically, I promise you, it's not your fault. And it's often, you know, sometimes when we get the iron level, because low iron kids don't eat. simple. They don't want to eat, they have no energy to eat, they become low muscle tone, even opening, closing their mouth becomes exhausting for them, so they don't eat. So make sure you check that out. That is like number one, okay? Vitamin D, number two, check that out. Make sure that's okay. Make sure they are going to the toilet every single day. A child has to poop at least once a day. If your child is not, and properly, and it has to be thin sausage shaped, brown, anything other than that is a problem, okay? I had a child came to me who hadn't been to the toilet for 5 weeks, not 5 days, 5 weeks. Do you think that child was eating, was sleeping? He was a mess. I can't even believe it. It's the worst case I've ever seen. And so that can't happen. Even skipping a day means that you end up with poo backed up in the colon. It presses on the stomach. You don't want to eat. It becomes all very uncomfortable. So make sure you speak to your GP. Please don't be afraid of going to your GP. They want to help you. They might not be able to. They do if you approach them in the right way and not say that this is all, I want my child fixed. It's like, my child is not going to the toilet, hasn't been, he's really uncomfortable, he's screaming, he's not sleeping, he's not eating. If a doctor does not pay attention to that, you should complain to the GMC, okay? Simple as that. I don't think, and to be honest, my experience with doctors has been fantastic. I have to say 90% of the GPs we approach have been very open to doing everything for us. So having a blood test done is traumatic for a child. I understand that, but it's important to make sure that you're getting the basics right. Okay. And if your child isn't pooping, very important. A lot of kids don't go to the toilet properly. It's usually food sensitivity driven. Dairy is very constipating. If you have real intolerances, you can get very bunged up. But if you can't change things, just give him whatever, some laxatives even, Senna, anything from over the counter. Just get him opened up and you can deal with the rest later. Okay, does that answer your question?
Yes, but what can they do now? Like
that's what they do. So first they have to identify if there's a problem, because if there's a problem, nothing they do will work. Yeah, they're not going to be able to will their child into eating. All they can do is present the child with healthy options, and whether if it's better for the child to have one mouthful of a good food than like a whole bowl of something not rubbish. So I understand that, but sometimes that's not even possible. So identify medical issues, make sure your child is pooping every day, top up their iron, top up their vitamin D. And when you do all of that and your child does not improve at all and does not become more interested in food, happens 9 times out of 10, they become interested in food. But there's that odd child that has major issues. Then you need input, you need occupational therapy, you need a feeding program, which is it's beyond our capacity, beyond our remit of things that we can do.
Okay, can you answer some of the question by the mother?
Let's do that, okay.
Right, so what is the starting point for someone with a very low budget, and which tests are essential when they come to your clinic?
Okay, the essential tests will be based on what the child is going through. So if we have a child who has tremendous issues with gut, then we would need to do a stool test is really helpful to us to know what's going on, as well as maybe a food sensitivity test, because to see what's happening. However, if you don't have money to do that, we are clinicians, have been doing this a long time. We can get you started. Testing is not essential. It just means that it rules out certain things that we won't do, because it becomes, you need that information to help that child. But we can always start on something like a nice basic protocol to get the child moving along, and then identify whether testing is important or not. If a child is, let's say, doesn't seem to have a huge amount of gut issues, but is really thin and like has low muscle tone and is or tired all the time or anything like that, then you go to look at what their metabolic state is. So a urine organic acid becomes very important. So it depends. I've also found that children from the Somalian community have very high toxic load, and I haven't quite figured out yet whether the toxic load is because of historical toxicity, because you know when you give birth you dump almost 70% of your toxins into your baby, and so that might be from the parent maybe, or it might be that they have a problem detoxifying because they don't have the right nutrients, or they have blocks in their DNA a little bit.
What blocked the methylation?
Exactly. I didn't want to use that word in case it was a bit sort of
sorry.
eyebrow for some of the people, but methylation, exactly. So we check, we kind of identify all of that. So it depends on what type of child we get. Ideally, I like to do, you know, as clinicians, the more testing we do, the more clear things become, but we don't need them always. Okay, we can work without at the beginning. Okay, next question. So shall I read them out, or you want to read them out?
Carry on. Yes.
Okay, so number 2 is, why is detox important before tackling parasites? Okay, so because parasites tend to feed off toxins. That's the theory that is, we believe. And so if you try and tackle parasites with antiparasitics, if your toxic load is still high, it's like trying to crawl out of a pit that's very slippery and muddy. You keep sliding back. So you don't make the progress you need. And so if there is a significant toxic load, we kind of do it at the same time, generally speaking. So we'll do an antiparasitic, maybe with a really good binder that helps we identify which binder is best, depending on what type of toxins we believe are there. So we do them normally in tandem. You don't have to, you'll never get to a point where you go, okay, my child has no toxins now. You know, it just doesn't happen. So you have to be working almost together. So when you do that, our results are so much better than just doing an antiparasitic. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So and number 3 is this something as in biomed that needs to be long-term or forever? It depends. Not really. You know, it's usually the way we work is it takes us about between 6 and 18 months, depending on the severity, what issues the child has, to get to the end goal, which is a balanced, healthy child who's eating properly, pooping properly, sleeping well, is engaged, is learning to their full capacity. So they are at their best that they can possibly be in their health. And then we put them maybe on a little kind of maintenance program where they have a really good multivitamin, and they have a probiotic, for example, and some good oils to keep them going. It shouldn't be much more than that. Sometimes a child has a metabolic disorder where they need long-term. For your community, I mean, it almost makes me cry, because I think if you had all been told when you came to this country, even as a young child, or you were even born here, that vitamin D needs to be topped up literally all the time, so much of your issues, the children would not be in the state they're in. You know, I do believe that, because vitamin D has an impact on the folate receptors in the brain. So, and you get folic acid, as you know, or folate during pregnancy. Don't take folic acid ideally, but if you take folate, like a good pregnancy multi now has methylfolate or something, active folate in it. And so if you take that and it has a good level of vitamin D, you're done. You know, but it never does. There's not enough in there, you know, to top you up.
Can I just say, with my son, I had hyperparesis gravidarum, and I had 2 liters of iron transfusion. He was a very high-risk pregnancy, and we were lucky that he survived this. And literally, I was not eating nothing. It was a very severe case. And, you know, then he had, you know, it was very complicated. And then C-section, and, you know, he had a lot of issues. And now we are under care of biomedical in Holland, you know, to sort his issues out. He does have a bit of issues. We're undergoing some of the testing. But is there's a link between, you know, of course it is, you know, logically it is, there's a link, the mother health and also the condition, because many of the ladies in my group, they did have also hyperpromesis in their pregnancies.
Yeah, I mean, all of that matters, you know, all of that matters. It's important to keep yourself, I mean, even stress levels, you know, just normal, like having too much stress in pregnancy releases too much cortisol, which is a stress hormone in your system, and that can impact your baby. Having not enough iron, not having enough vitamin D, not eating right, all of this. So it's really, really important to address all of that. The morning sickness issue that comes up a lot, obviously, is sometimes a sign that you're very histamine intolerant, and that is very important to understand. So if you go to my to our website, there's a really good article on histamines, and it talks about that. And so when we have in our questionnaire those type of questions are answered, we know that that might be an issue. So we check for that to see if that's a problem or not. And then you can help, because histamine gets broken down in the gut and in your central nervous system in two completely different ways. In the gut, it needs an enzyme, which you can take as a supplement. And in the central nervous system, it needs methylated compounds like B12, folate, TMG, SAMe, whatever it is that you can take. So those are the things that become very important. Taking a good case history is just the best for when we see patients. But yeah, so I mean, just get the basics right, really is. Some of that is just avoidance. So if your family, you have lots of people who might be looking to have other babies, prepare yourself, you know, get ready.
So the mother start doing a hair sample, just, you know, a toxin test screen, just to see what toxin.
Yeah, I mean, they can do that. Make sure they have a proper full blood count done with their GP with ferritin and vitamin D. Just as that's a no-brainer to me. You have to do that, and top that up. You know, work on yourself for 6 months before you have a baby, so that you are in optimum health. And
none of that.
right?
I've done none of that. And
I mean, nobody has. Did I do it? No, I didn't do it. So
with my second son, I did, and the difference is just amazing. You can just see it in him. So I was more aware with my second son, but with him, I had no idea. And it's a shame. And I think a lot of people need to, you know, become aware that as a community now, we do have a lot of deficiency, especially with vitamin D, and how that can impact our children. Because I keep saying, you know, this is not our natural environment to be in.
Totally. And there's a whole load of new science that's coming on. I mean, this is a bit highbrow, but looking at them, you know, you've heard of mitochondria, right? So if mitochondria are like little tiny little things inside your cell that power you. And it's not about giving you just energy to run around, but energy for your brain to function and your muscles to function. It's for everything. And so you know, in school they teach you like you've got one mitochondria in a cell, you've got thousands of them, you know, in a cell. So they are like your batteries, okay? But the mitochondria only, it has its own DNA. So it's the only thing in your body outside your own DNA and your bacterial DNA that has its own DNA, and it only comes from the mum. So life began female for sure. Okay, this is proof positive. So this is very important. So if you have mitochondrial issues, look in the mum's line and look at what's happening in the family history there. That's quite important. And that it gets damaged very easily from infections, from, I don't know, what else? Infections. Then you've got toxic load, of course, stress. All those things can damage the mitochondria and it doesn't work properly. Okay, so what's the next question? Why don't you ask me? It's easier.
Is
Go
it
on.
number 3 or 4? Yeah, 4.
Whichever.
Can biomedical work with rigidity? What?
Rigidity, I think maybe they mean that that person is very like inflexible. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, biomed doesn't work on a single symptom. This is the difference between medicine and biomedicine. Biomedicine looks at the whole picture, because I always give this analogy. So if you, I think I've said it in the past, you know, if you and I both have a headache, the reason for our headache might be very different. It could be that I am dehydrated, and it could be that you were banging your head against the wall last night, you know? So for me, I need to drink water. For you, you need to stop banging your head against the wall. So it's, the pain is the same, but the solution is different. And it's like that. So picky eating even could be vitamin D, could be constipation, could be esophageal issues, could be stomach ulcers, could be stomach problems, could be a disturbance in the brain. It's possible that there is something wrong in a part of the brain that's not communicating properly. So the reasons are multifactorial. So yes, it can work depending if we can identify it. Yeah.
Right. Quick